Nice to be here in Istanbul. Sorry I didn't prepare a speech. I will try to be slow for the translators. Well, I did prepare a speech, but so many things happen inside of me, it's hard to go to blah, blah, blah thing, you know, I need to express myself. And yeah, it was so interesting for me today. I thought we had a problem with the press in Cyprus. And when I heard this section before this section about what is happening with the journalists here and the persecutions and the imprisonments, I just thought about the word freedom. The word freedom in Greek means eleftheria, and comes from a word that means elefsome. So it means actually, the word freedom in Greek means something that is coming, something that is always in the future, that we are going for it. So as much as freedom they give us, it's obvious we always need more. And we will never reach there. We always go for more freedom. And when I was listening, I'll go to Cyprus, just give me a second. And when I was listening about this story with Nuktan, writing about the coup, and then I realized where the Turkish media is missing it. There's not going to be a coup. There is a coup in Turkey against the media. And the media must rise above that and realize it and talk about it. Because if you got 50 policemen walking and occupying for 3 days your newspapers and your radios and you cannot talk freely, then that's a coup. That's all it takes to call something a coup. So that's all I want to say about Turkey. Now going to Cyprus. Until 2003, I was, as most people, exposed only to my truth and to my community's propaganda machine. That the Turks are evil, and a good Turk is a dead Turk. Actually, my wife thought that the Turks had tails and big teeth, and she grew up with that conception, that they eat teens, not what's in the tin, the teens. But you can't imagine how propaganda can work on a child's mind. So when I was a kid, I was a nationalist. I grew up as a nationalist. I was a Greek nationalist. I hated the Turks. I hated the communists. I hated I couldn't even see the red color before me, because I was taught that communism and Turkey are the enemy of humanity. That's how we grew up as a nationalist. So until 2000, well, by the year 2000, let's say, I started to change into internationalism. And I started to read about Marx, and I started to have another perspective of the world. And then I started to think about, who are those Turkish Cypriots? You know, who are these people? What is Turkey? What is really happening? So I tried to the internet to try and understand the Turkish Cypriot politics. And did they suffer also? Did they not suffer? What happened to them in our history? So then I was exposed to many things, but I couldn't confirm if it was true or propaganda. Now the UNDP spent millions of pounds in Cyprus for the peace process, but unfortunately it never reached the majority of the people, because it was all given for researchers, and it was scholars meeting in universities, talking more and more about less and less. You know, sorry, I love the scholars. I teach in a university, don't take me wrong. But you know, there's a language, the majority is in the coffee shops. The majority is in the fields, you know, planning. So if we don't find a language for the people, you know, we never reach that majority that will vote for peace. So they are just exposed to the mainstream media, and the mainstream media is really a disaster in many cases, in many places, especially in Cyprus, except from a few exceptions. So in 2003, when the gates finally opened, I took my wife and crossed over to drive home. We said, let's go home, because I was brought up in Famagusta, and my father's fathers are buried in Famagusta. So we got a bit afraid. It took us 12 hours waiting on the gates to cross and to go home. But we were a bit afraid because it was becoming dark, and we're going to drive in this barbarian. What if they kill us in the night when we come back so many miles, you know? We may get killed. But anyway, the desire to go home. So we reached home. I left Famagusta when I was 8 years old. under bombardment of the military of the Turkish Air Force. God bless their soul. And when we reached, when I reached the year of 36, I guess, 3-4 years ago, 36, 37. So it's like after 33 years, I returned back home. I was 8 when I left. But I could drive my car, get all the turnings correct, and reach home. There was not one wrong turning. So I reach home, and by the way, I'm crying all the way through, you know. I'm just weeping out my tears, you know. And I reach home, and this old, beautiful lady opens the door. And she greets me, and she says, she calls her sister. They spoke Greek, they were Turkish Cypriots. And said, the owner came. So what? I was expecting a barbarian, you know. And then she calls me the owner of my house, which I left 30 years ago. So for the first time, I realized that this woman never felt that that home is hers. And then she apologized, said, sorry, we didn't paint the ceiling this year. You didn't? You know? How dare you? And then I walk in the corridor. By the way, the house became so small because I had this size when I left the house. So now I'm so big, so the kitchen was small, the bedroom was small. And I go in the corridor, and there is my father's picture and his doctor diploma for 30 years hanging on the wall waiting for me. It's amazing. I had the shock of my life. How could this barbarian Turk have my father's picture for 30 years on the wall, waiting to give it to me back? And she took it down and fixed it and cleaned it and gave it to me. Then you realize you're exposed to how badly I was exposed to propaganda. So then I start to investigate, and I start to discover the crimes committed by the Greek Cypriots against the Turkish Cypriots. So I decided to shock my society. I said, if this is true, my community must know what we did. So I knew that my community suffered. I know women, I've interviewed women who've been raped. A Greek woman who was raped, and she had the soldiers made the moon thing that you have on your flag on her belly. She was a Greek woman after she was raped. And, but I didn't know that Turkish Cypriot women were raped by Greeks. That wasn't part of the deal. I shouldn't know that. So I started to discover that. I knew all about all the Greeks who were missing, where they were killed, almost how they were killed. But suddenly I realized that the Greeks did exactly the same thing to the Turkish Cypriots, and it had to be exposed. So I took my camera, took a few people of a crew, and we went, and I recorded our crimes as an act of acknowledgement of truth and reconciliation. And I took it to my community. And like my friend Neshe, I became a trader. Now, I never lied to anybody. I just told them, okay, for all these years, for 30 years, you made hundreds of hours of documentaries talking about the Turkish crimes. So let's put the balance now. This hour of documentary is putting a balance to your 30 hours. Of course, no TV channel showed it. It was never on the media. I was a trader big time. And then the Turkish media, of course, your mainstream media, of course, propaganda. The Greeks are admitting what they have done. I said to them, shame on you to take the death of the children in Murata and Sandalar, to take the suffering of these people and use it for propaganda. Shame on you. I didn't do it as a Turkish fascist. I'm not a fascist. I did it as a Greek seeking for reconciliation, asking you, now it's your turn to understand me. I have understood what we have done. I ask for forgiveness. I ask you to forgive me, and I am admitting my part. Why don't you do the same? That was what I was trying to tell them. And I was wishing and I was praying, and I said, I hope one day one Turkish Cypriot will do what I did for your own community. And then we start to realize that nobody was willing. I said, okay, I told them this year, I'll do it for you. Now that you know that I love you, Now that you know that I'm willing, I'll do it for you. And then everybody got frustrated, you know. And suddenly we drive with my wife, we drive, you know, on the highway with the children, and you got all these cars coming in front of you in the highway and try to throw you off the road, and, you know, they try to mess around. I know it's time over, isn't it? So anyway, I just want to say that truth is very important in our communities. We need to be able to reflect. We need to be able to look at ourselves. We need to ask ourselves as governments, as people, as elite, why are we putting our people into suffering? Why is there, the Turkish government must ask, why am I putting this 301 law? The Greek Cypriot must ask, why I am not admitting my crimes in '63 against the Turkish Cypriots? But also the Turkish Cypriot must reflect and say, why did we kill all these Greek Cypriots? Because so many hundreds of people died. And it's now the time, the correct time, to ask for forgiveness. The media in Cyprus is so much better than Turkey that I didn't want to talk about it. You know, I mean, you're in a mess. So enjoy the mess. God bless you.